Senator McAllister, your time has expired. Senator Rennick.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Principal. I'm glad to rise today to speak to this particular issue. Acting Deputy President, sorry, to speak to this issue. And in particular, I'd like to just remind Senator Keneally of the boats, because when the Labor Party was last in power, over 1,200 people died at sea in the boats by something that was totally brought on by the Labor Party. Now compare that to the number of people who died with COVID, and that is only just past 1,000, and a lot of those had co-morbidities. And I can assure you that the Morrison government didn't design COVID. Unlike the boat people, unlike the boat crisis that was designed by the Labor Party, and it was something that was totally self-inflicted. So it's a bit rich for them to come in here and play games and accuse the Morrison government of causing deaths which had, was basically out of their control. The Morrison government, Australia, has got one of the lowest COVID deaths in the world, and we've actually got one of the lowest case fatality rates in the world. And it's worth noting that this year we've had less than 100 COVID deaths out of over 20,000 cases. That is a case fatality rate of 0.04%, or 4 people, less than 4 people out of every 1,000 cases. Compare that to the number of deaths in 2019. Australia had 170,000 deaths out of 25 million people. That was a death rate of 7 people out of 1,000. So the COVID fatality rate is just around half of the overall fatality rate. Now let's talk about the vaccine rollout. We've basically now got 86% of over 70-year-olds first dosed, and over 63% of over 70-year-olds second dosed. And I get a little bit sick and tired of hearing the Labor Party talk about this AstraZeneca-Pfizer as though it's a competition. I mean, the fact of the matter is this, is that last August, when Labor loved to claim that we could have bought 40 million doses, the fact is that the Pfizer vaccine hadn't even been approved for safety and hadn't even been proved that it actually worked. It's a completely new technology. Interestingly enough, the World Health Organization came out in September last year and said that it was going to take another 9 months, or wouldn't be until mid-2021, until such time as the Pfizer vaccine was going to be ready. Another point to note is that the Pfizer vaccine had to be refrigerated and stored at -70 degrees. Now, the Morrison coalition government had to make a decision back then. They went with the AstraZeneca vaccine as its main supplier because they could get it produced here in Australia. And they could get it produced here in Australia by none other than CSL. Now, to remind people about the history of CSL, that used to be government-owned. It was actually set up in 1917 so that Australia, by the government, so that Australia would have its own, wait for it, vaccine supplies. And what happened was that the Labor Party sold CSL, and in that time since, it's now got into blood transfusion and a lot of other products, but its main core business, vaccine production, has gone by the wayside. So for Labor to come in here and claim that, oh, we haven't got enough vaccines, they ought to look in the mirror, because the damage was done. That was caused right back in 1992 by a bloke by the name of Paul Keating, and one of his great advisors, Bill Botel. He's out there running around being an expert on everything, and yet he was one of the advisors to Keating that allowed CSL to be sold. I mean, the hypocrisy is astounding. And it should also be noted that the US didn't even export Pfizer. The first country it exported Pfizer to was Mexico on the 29th of April. On the 29th of April. So the USA is exporting very few Pfizer vaccines, and that seems to be overlooked in all of this, is that it's not that easy to just go and conjure 50-odd million Pfizer vaccines at the drop of a hat, keep them stored at -70 degrees and get them rolled out. But can I say that the vaccination program is well and truly on its way, and it hasn't been helped, of course, by Queensland's Chief Health Officer, who's been there under a Labor government, who's been basically talking people out of getting the AstraZeneca vaccine. Having all the while she's saying this, she's failed to disclose that her own husband used to work and consult to Pfizer. Now, if that's not a conflict of interest, I don't know what is. But can I say that that type of behaviour, while we're trying to encourage vaccine rollouts, hasn't helped anyone. So it's about time Labor got on board and started to work for the interests of the Australian people rather than whinging and wailing.
Thank you, Senator Rennick.